All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome. Hey. Welcome to Launching a Church podcast. We're going to go through a little presentation. We got some handouts also, so if this QR code is not working, it's a little faded, it'll be on the handout for you also. So we're just going to introduce ourselves. My name is Caleb Cox. I'm a pastor at Redeemer Lutheran Church in Northern Colorado in Fort Collins. And this guy.
I'm Sam. I also work at Redeemer Lutheran Church as our site pastor.
Yep, exactly. So we've been working together. It's both of our first calls. Been there for almost 4 years and almost 5 years. Mm-hmm. And we started a podcast, three years ago? Yep.
Yeah, so 0 to 60, 3 years flat.
It only took us 3 years, and then we figured it out. Yeah. So that's what this is. If you are like, oh, this is not where I'm supposed to be, you are totally free to go. And, it's the sixth session of the experience so far, right? And I mean, we're all at that point where you're 10 minutes in and you're like, this is awful, or this is not practical or applicable. You have absolute permission to leave, okay? We will even applaud you as you go because you have made the decision to value your time and go to something better and more important. So, but in all seriousness, if you do decide there's something better to do or you want to connect with somebody, feel free to leave, okay? You're definitely welcome to do that.
We are in the Wi-Fi free zone of campus.
Yeah.
There's only the CLS Wi-Fi. We will give you that password at the end of our session, though. So you just gotta wait to find out that I'm lying.
Yep. So you want to kick us off?
Yeah. So cool. Okay, I got an opening question. Who's here to launch a church podcast? Raise your hand. Okay, some of you. Okay, how many of you already have a podcast? A handful. Okay. All right. How many of you listen to podcasts on a regular basis? Okay. If you answered yes to we already have a podcast, there's going to be some stuff that might be useful for you, maybe some things to help sharpen your skills or whatever that we're doing, maybe some things but this might not exactly be what you're looking for. If you're thinking about launching a church podcast, you are in the exact right room. If you never listen to podcasts and you this is how we're going to get the young kids into church, I'm glad you're here, but you really need to kind of know the world of podcasts. That will really benefit you just kind of diving in. Okay, so we're all in the right place. Like we said, we're not trying to kick you out. And if you're the last person and everybody else has left, you're not allowed to leave.
So now that we're done totally defacing ourselves.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pass around some handouts. It has the QR code on there. Like I said, This guy likes to consider himself to be post-paper.
Yeah.
So on the QR code that you will receive, you can scan that, and all of our handouts are available as a PDF. It's not populatable as a PDF because we're not that smart. But I'll be handing them out, so just take one and pass it along and scan that QR code if you'd rather have the link.
You can also go to Linktree/The Table Podcast, and that will give you everything The Table, including the link to the BPM handouts. So I think a big important thing as we're talking about launching a church podcast is Simon Sinek's starting with the why. Why are you doing this? And so as those are coming through, we're giving you two sheets. One is a blank worksheet, if you will, for you to kind of very easily and simply go through some of these questions for yourself, for your church, for your organization. And the second is our answers to those questions. So the first question is, why does this exist? And as it's coming around, you're gonna see what our answer is that we want to start conversations. Oh, I can also put it on the screen, like I prepped. We want to start conversations about topics and themes that we can't tackle on a Sunday morning. There's a lot of subjects that we really want to dive into, that we believe that Jesus is speaking into, that our people are wrestling with, and a 20-minute Sunday sermon isn't the platform to have those conversations. And so we created the table in a large part because we want to have those conversations, we want to start those conversations, but we need a different platform to do it. And
There's a lot of things that we already talk about in sermons, but to do it justice, to have this platform of the podcast, to elongate them, to have guests on, it allows us a little bit more flexibility.
So what are some really controversial topics that we've done?
We've talked about, our very first one was Suffering with Bob Cole, the Keebler elf himself.
Yep.
We've talked about abortion. We talked about mental health, mental illness. What else have we talked about? Suicide. We did one on suicide. We just did one with Mark Schultz on LGBTQ stuff that has not been released yet, but will be very soon. So, yeah, it's a lot of, just...
We've also done really fun episodes too, like
our Christmas ones are the best.
Yeah, so
we talked about Christmas movies and Christmas tech. Yeah,
this last Advent we did the Mount Rushmore of Christmas for each of the 4 weeks of Advent. It was fun. Anyway, so why does this exist? This is our reason. What it is for you, I don't know, right? That's something that you really need to think through. And launching a podcast without having a plan for why you're doing it is it's a waste of your time. Okay. The next question is, who is my audience? Who are you trying to reach? For us, we're trying to reach the people of Northern Colorado, especially the people who call Redeemer home. This is for our church. God has seen it fit that neither Caleb nor I should achieve any notoriety through podcasting. And we have small level of listeners, but we create a lot of conversations with people at our church. And that's why we're doing it. If we were doing it to get fame or to get a lot of people to listen, we are miserably failing. But we do start a lot of conversations. Yeah. I want to read an email that came through like a couple hours ago from the podcast that we released yesterday. And it's a very nice email. So okay, yeah, it's very flattering to us. But the podcast that we released yesterday was Be Happy, Feel Good? No, Feel Good, Be Happy, which was an examination of moral therapeutic deism, right? And some of you theology nuts are like, oh, yeah, MTD, get that in my veins. But without going through the whole letter, the person's like, wow, you were speaking directly to us. We have kids, grew up in the church, Lutheran middle school, Lutheran high school, Concordia Irvine. And when our son died, they kind of fell away from church. We have a 19-year-old grandson. He's not in church at all. And you gave us some ways to think through what they are thinking about religion, what they're thinking about God, what they're thinking about, and some ways for us to have some conversations with them. That was the exact why of what we're doing. So what we want to do right now is, does everybody have a handout?
No. Or at least the PDF or the...
If you don't, grab yourself a spare piece of paper.
Extras are back there.
There's, cool. Right? Oh, extras? Okay, well, let's get those coming around this way. What I want to do on a piece of paper or whatever, I want you to take and to answer the why. Now, you may not be ready to start a church podcast. Just think to yourself, if I were to start a church podcast, right, or whatever, what is my why? And I want you to answer your why and your audience, okay? What is my why? Why does this exist? And who is my audience? And I'm going to give you guys not enough time to do it. You're going to have 1 minute. 1 minute to do it, okay? Go. This. I'll show it to you. I'll screw down to big white. And then you should let me move it to the left to get to the answer. Yeah. It is warm. It's very warm.
Upstairs.
Yep. Okay, timer up. Timer up. Hey, I hope you came up with something in that not enough amount of time. What I want you to do now is to take whatever you crafted. I want you to turn to someone next to you, and I want you guys to share your why with someone else. Okay? You're going to take 2.5 minutes to do that.
Orlando, Florida, and we've been wanting to do a podcast just having authentic conversations about mental health and validating how people struggle on a day-to-day basis. We're not a church show, so it's a little different. Laura, what about you?
Yeah. And I think what's really cool is that everybody has different whys. We probably have 40 different whys for our show, right? Because you're taking over. Plus, plus, I think I'm going to own a lot of the how. Right? So,
As long as you're okay with me just kind of
no. But, we all are what that we're talking about. Podcast. But what is that? Right? It's free flowing conversation, highly produced, whatever.
Orlando, Florida. I think it's harder for us with our volunteers. So, we both go to St. Luke's. Yeah.
right after the house.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the
How we're talking about equipment, especially.
Yeah.
Well, I think it actually might be here, right? Because we're going to talk about the equipment. You're going to show the picture of it, and then is it a picture of our setup?
So,
The
yeah.
order,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So then it could be right. I would say after this. So let's do record and then produce. You can show kind of you had those things pulled up.
Yeah.
So let's just do that. Kind of just go in order in more detail for us. Yeah.
that sound good?
So when we talk about Imovie,
That's when we'll play it.
Our teacher.
all right. Done and.
All right, everybody, let's bring it back. Let's come back together. All right, so hopefully you had a good conversation with your neighbor or neighbors about your why. I'm just going to keep talking. You guys can listen when you want. Yeah. Hey. Louder for the back. Louder for the back. Yep. So what's really awesome about this is there are, 30 of you in here, 35 or something, maybe a few more, and every single one of us probably has a different why, right? Some of you might be in here and you're like, I'm not even actually starting a church podcast. I just want to kind of start a podcast, I just want to have conversations with people, or, with me being a Jesus follower, I just want to start talking with people, and that's fantastic. It does not have to be for your church specifically, which is kind of the beauty of this, right? We all have different whys. We all have different audiences that we want to reach. But we really think that it's important to start with that why before you ever get into the how or the what. And that's what we're going to go to next. So we're going to go to the what for us. And again, you have the handout. And so our what for us, for what this will look like, kind of our version of how we podcast, is really an unscripted, not necessarily off the cuff, but an unscripted conversation between Sam and I. We are... what's really cool is we have a really great relationship. We're very different people, and we have a really great conversations together, and we just want people to get to see that, really. So
He's
for
my
us,
friend.
yeah, we're buddies.
Yeah.
It's crazy, yeah. So it's an unscripted conversation. We just kind of say, here's what we're going to talk about, and then before we really push record, we have just kind of 10 minutes or so where we talk about what are you thinking, what do you want to go with this. We maybe share articles if it's something that has an article or a video about it. And then we just push record, and we just kind of see what happens. It literally is just a conversation between us. A lot of the time we will invite guests on, especially when it's something that is above our pay grade. When we talked about suicide, we were like, we should have a counselor on to talk about this. And so we invited a counselor to join us, and we just kind of went back and forth asking questions and responding. So primarily it is a conversation between us. However, depending on the topic, we like to invite somebody to join us, especially because we are two white dudes who are pastors. We love to have a little bit of diversity, whether it's gender or just different stories and backgrounds than our own. So that's at least what the what looks like for us. Anything you have to add about that, Sam?
So, like, if you listen to a lot of podcasts, I think there's a huge spectrum between, like, in level of production. So, like, way over here is Radiolab, where, like, every second is planned and edited and, like, whoosh, and it's, like, this audio experience. And then, like, over here is one of my favorites. It's called Less Doing by Ari Meisel. It's, like, a productivity thing. And, like, he just, like, talks into his phone while he's jogging, like, for 5 minutes, and then, like, sends it off to some people to produce, right? In both situations, content's king, right? You listen to Ari Meisel because that 5-minute segment on whatever productivity tip he's giving you, you're like, that's great, and I don't care that he's jogging and speaking into his iPhone, right? Whereas with Radiolab, it's this whole, like, production, and it has its own value in that. And so when we're talking about the what, we're all kind of here about a podcast, but what does that podcast look like for you? Where are you kind of falling on the production level? And then part of that goes back into, what's your why? What is the what that I need to accomplish to get to my why? Because it's all about the why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're going to go, Sam is the brilliance behind it. I'm just like the pretty voice. Because we all have faces for podcasts. That's what we like to joke. So he's going to go into more like the production and the editing stuff. Another what behind it too is like maybe you don't want to have a conversation. For those of you who are like pastors in here, maybe you just want to reproduce your sermon in a podcast, right?
Yeah.
We're preaching, I'm recording it, and I'm going to send it out on the podcast. So maybe it's not a conversation. Maybe it's not a dialogue. Maybe it's a monologue. Maybe it's just a question and answer. There's a wide variety.
Maybe it's a 5-minute daily devotional,
Yeah.
right? Like it could be,
That's
what can be anything, right? It's just using podcast as a platform to push it out.
Exactly. So just like what we did with the why, we want to give you guys a chance to just think through it, okay? Again, not going to be enough time, but just to give you a second to really kind of think about what we shared and to think about it yourself, and then we will have you share again, okay? So right now, just think for about a minute or so about what your what is. What's it going to look like for you? Put that down, and then we'll bring you back together, and then you'll share, okay? So right now, kind of silent.
Which is good because you can answer the question and stuff. I think we need to just pull up the questions that way.
Well, and I think, so we have stuff that's prepped. Yes. I think we should read those questions and say, so hey, we got this question.
Yeah.
So here's a little bit of a look at what that looks like.
Absolutely. Sounds like Tara and Trevor and what they say.
Did anybody fill out 2 responses? Yeah. Answers are yes. 5 responses.
The question that was asked. Yes, that question. Are you coming? Yes. That's our fault.
All right, guys, so now we're going to do the same thing. About 2.5 minutes, share with those around you, okay, what your what is. And it'll be exciting to see who's different than you. Here you go.
Like juice squeeze.
Because they're right. Yeah, so we can just bring this up towards the end and say, here's the questions.
So we have the juice squeeze slide before. I don't know if we wrote it down.
I don't think I wrote down where it was, but I believe it's pretty much all before this.
It's all, but that's the last.
Well, yeah.
That's the.
I would say if we haven't gotten to it after this, it's probably
Right, yeah. Yeah, I think so.
We've been friends for a while. Like, I don't know. That's what we were trying to think.
Maybe it's before we get to the time. I think it's before we get to the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Bring a little bit of that, but
Yeah.
then just like
This is how we think of it.
it sucks. wanted to pull my hair out because my kid gives it back. I don't know, just like all like super authentic to be like you can relate. Like, so that's why it's probably more towards women. Yeah, but I think like mental health, faith, parenting, marriage, like just that, like just being authentic about it. Yeah.
This chopstick is nice, but like I put it in there, it looks like I got like a goiter. There's nowhere good to put it.
In a bag, I guess. Is that from the seminary?
Yeah, man.
Well, they got the EOS. They got the legit. That's not the. It's not like the.
Tastes good. I'm gonna eat it.
Dude, I didn't realize it was good chapstick.
Yeah, man.
That's legit chapstick.
I don't know if they have any left.
Oh, yeah. That looks. I mean, that. Yeah. Wow.
I don't know how many conversations we can get about that.
All right, so let's bring it back. Let's bring it back. Thank you very much. It's not enough time, but I'm sorry. That is what it is. Okay, so you might be here because you're like, how do I do this? What's my equipment? How do I put it together? How do other people access it? These might be some of the questions that you came with, but now that you have a why, now that you have a what, we can finally get to the how. So, how do we do this? Let's go through the answers that we provided on the handout. So, we kind of thought about, so how do we do it when we're together in person? And then how do we do it when we're like interviewing somebody and they're not with us live? So, that's kind of how I presented it to you. There was a long time when we were doing everything almost like distance through Zoom.
Well, so when we first started, we were exclusively together.
Yes.
And then kind of, especially during COVID, we really changed to Zoom exclusively. And then we realized when we did have a guest that we kind of had to use Zoom. And it's much, as you'll probably get into, it's much easier to have everybody on Zoom. If you're going to have one person on Zoom, it's better to just have everybody on Zoom rather than like the two of us like, so we have some questions for you. What do it's just weird.
Yeah.
That was not for us, but
So while we're talking about Zoom, we've played with a couple of different technologies for getting a good recording. Zoom isn't perfect, and we'll talk about this in kind of the 10 Commandments of podcasting, but it's really good to have like backup fail-safe systems. We fly like without a parachute. We don't do any backup with our Zoom recording. We just trust that it's going to work.
And it's bit us in the butt a few times.
Only a couple times.
We had like 4 lost episodes.
But that wasn't really. But those weren't from Zoom though. Those were those were all in person. Anyway, so we use Zoom. Zoom, just as a note, as a product, right? You can either save it to the cloud. Now, if you save it to the cloud, the file that you get, everything is all together. But you can go into the settings of Zoom and say, I want separate audio files. And then you can download so that each person, their audio is right there. Now, if you also want to, now this goes back to your what, if you have a video component to your podcast that you're putting on your website or on YouTube or wherever, then you can have that there right there with Zoom. But what I really like about Zoom is the separate audio files, because then it makes editing audio, if that's something that's important to you, way easier. Yes?
So you're saying you have you have different files that are different audio tracks for each person?
Yes, you can do that through Zoom. There's a lot of services that are out there. We found Zoom was both very accessible for the people we were inviting who aren't podcast people, and also gave us a good high-quality product, or a high enough quality product. We're going to talk about Juice Squeeze in a little bit. But yeah, great. Any other questions? Okay, so that's kind of online. In order to do that, what we use is our high-quality mics, the same mics that we use, and we're going to talk about our equipment in a minute. Computer with Zoom, and you need an audio interface, because the kind of mics we have are XLR, the like little 3 prongs that you use at church, or like the Shure mics, right? And you have to have a way to convert that into something your computer can read. So you need some kind of audio interface. We'll go through the interfaces that we use. Okay, so in person, what we are currently doing, because we've kind of gone through a bunch of different iterations of this, is we have the microphones. We have like a little space set up in the church that's like for recording. It's not very good with the sound because we don't have any kind of like sound muffling thing. And we'll show you a picture of it. We use my iPad that I'm using here for this presentation. We feed the mics directly from, they're captured into the audio capture device, the audio interface. It goes to the iPad records the audio and the video. It's not a good system if you want to edit separate audio tracks, but in our Juice Squeeze, we're like, we don't want to do that anymore. We're like trying to get the squeeze as small as possible for us. So that's kind of what it looks like for us to record. Yes?
You said video as well? No, aren't podcasts?
Podcasts are audio, yeah. But if you want to put them on, so we're going to show where, because again, our why is people at church to start conversations. And for a large portion of our audience at church, accessing our podcast through our app, our church app, is where they go. And they really enjoy the video component, especially the older listeners. It's more, whatever, right? More accessible for them. Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, so that's how we record. Let's talk about producing. Asking this question: how will I edit and export my recording? So you've captured it in some way, right? Maybe you used your phone, right? Maybe you've got a whole really nice rig. Whatever you did, you've got the data. How are you going to take that and put it together in a way for other people to receive it? So here's what we do. And again, we are going for like path of least resistance. So we do everything in Imovie. And so this is what that looks like.
Somebody mind just shutting off the lights just real quick?
Yeah. So here's us. This is us in Imovie, and I'm going to show you like this little recording here from our most recent episode. No, I don't want to do that. I want to this. Now you can see what it looks like in Imovie. Okay, I'm going to press play. Welcome back. We are here. We're doing another episode of The Table where we're learning to have a seat at the intersection of Christ and culture. I'm Sam. Caleb's here with me. I'm here. I always think about what years I do. We're here. So, the silliness continues.
We're talking about good stuff too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I want to show you for what we do. You can do whatever you want. I'm showing you what we do. So this video is what is captured in the recording session. It's our audio. Again, we don't have separate audio tracks because I'm not editing separate tracks anymore. I used to do that, but I'm not doing it anymore. So sometimes that really hurts if one of our audios don't match, but we try very hard on the front end to make sure that our audio levels sound pretty level, because if one person sounds way higher, I have gone through and edited piece by piece, and it's brutal. Anyways, now down here is our intro theme song, and there's probably way better, more professional ways to do it, but this is pretty much the template that I have. And then right here are these like little MP4 files with our logo that we created in Canva. And so once I get a new episode, I take it and I drop it right here, I replace it, I make sure everything's still lined up, and then I press export, right? Like after trimming the edges. Because I'm looking for the path of least resistance. You can hit the lights again. So,
Can you do that in iMovie just for audio if you don't want to do video?
you can use iMovie to export just audio.
You
Yes.
can. Okay.
Yes.
Do you ever have any issues with the audio being ahead of the video?
Oh my gosh. You have no idea. I did not know this. So here's so many of the things we're sharing are things, man, we learned in the School of Hard Knocks. So we used to record video on the iPad, record the audio to our audio interface so that we would have the separate tracks, I would then take those tracks and then line it up with the video recorded from the iPad. But I didn't know that if things are recorded at different bit rates, I mean, you would think in your head that if I'm sitting here and I can line up my audio, that it's going to stay at the same rate as the video. But what happened was, about every 5 minutes, the lips would stop to sync, and then I would have to re-edit where the audio and the lips were, and it was like, I don't understand. Like, this doesn't make sense to me.
He's moved on from it, you can tell.
We've moved on. This is why we record directly to the iPad. Because that way we don't have to worry about trying to sync the videos and the lips and all that. Zoom is actually really wonderful because when it records and you're using that video recording from Zoom, it's already all perfectly lined up. You don't have to worry about the out-of-sync stuff. I'm not an expert. I can't really tell you why it's out of sync other than the research said bit rates are different. Whatever. Figure it out. You know, this is us. So, okay, yeah, great question. Yep. Anything else? Okay, I want to show you Canva because, again, so here is, I don't want to show you that yet. Here is Canva. And so Canva's who here's ever used Canva? Yeah, love Canva. So we essentially used to do, okay, now you can see it better. So we used to do like episode things where we would like print out like a description of the episode.
Oh yeah, we had Flame on the podcast. That was cool.
We did have fun. He's coming back on the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next week.
Yeah, next week. And then we'd have descriptions or maybe upcoming episodes. And then so I would go in, I would edit each one, download it as an MP4 to then drop into the podcast. And it was fine, but I was like, man, you know what? I'm just going to go with something generic. And we've been just doing generic. Because for us, we're going the path of least resistance. Just like plug and play every time, don't worry about it. You can do whatever you want. I'm just saying this is how we do it. Canva is a really great tool. I should have pulled up Artlist. I didn't pull up Artlist. Artlist.io is a great place if you're looking for license-free music. It's like $300 a year. The music's incredible on there. I don't know.
We've used it for a variety of
We
things
use it
with
for
our
a lot
church.
of different things at our church.
Yeah, so that's where it's useful.
Yeah.
If we just use it for us, it'd be a little steep. But
A question for you guys.
Yeah.
300 a year. Let's say you pick a song. Do you have the rights to that song?
Ever and ever.
Okay, it's not just for when you're subscribed.
No.
Okay.
Forever and always, yes.
I'll just add that Benny Sound is where a lot of YouTubers use,
Mhm.
and they have free stuff too. And I have a lot of my students that use that.
Yeah, you can find a lot of royalty-free music out there. Yeah, for sure. The last thing I want to show you, and we can turn the lights back on, this is our back end for Subsplash. It's our church app. Subsplash offers a way to publish podcasts. We haven't done a lot of research on the millions of different websites out there, but this is already included with like the fees that our church is already paying. Again, our why is to reach people at church, and so this works so well natively in our church app. So that's why we use it. I think there are probably better ones out there, but again, it goes back to your why, where you're going to host it. Okay, so we've talked about producing, distributing, Subsplash, all major podcast things. Here's, I think, maybe the most important thing I can communicate to you today is like, what's your juice squeeze ratio? Thank you, Dan Weber, for throwing that at me. What is your juice squeeze ratio?
You can find that first.
Yeah, so a squeeze is how much effort you're putting into it, and juice is how much juice you're getting from that squeeze.
so if your why is we want to have 200 listeners, you're going to have to figure out how much of a squeeze you need to do to get 200 listeners. That is not our why. We just want to reach people mainly in our church community, and they have the ability to share it.
Yeah.
So we have anywhere from 50 to 100 listeners, depending on the episode. Each episode gets that. And part of that, we feel great about that because we're reaching who we want, and our squeeze is not too difficult. Sam's doing a great job of sharing how we've really consistently and continue to trim it down.
How often do you release episodes?
Every other Thursday.
Now,
We used to do seasons, but now we're doing every other Thursday.
yeah. So we made a commitment this year to do for 2020 every other Thursday.
Yeah.
Which is what 50, whatever, not 50, some some amount of episodes.
26.
I'm a pastor, not a mathematician.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
Thank you. Yeah. So we figured that is actually doable.
Huh?
You just do like 4 a year?
No, we would do about that many, but we would release them in seasons.
Oh.
And there wasn't. I mean,
There's no rhyme or reason. To
Yeah, it's like what's line?
whose line
is it, anyways? Yeah.
We would do a season where there was like 10 episodes, and then we would do a season by theme really. So we did like a season on like grief, and so we had 4 episodes. That was suicide, grief, counseling, different things like that. And that was 4. We did one. Our church last Lent did ruthless elimination of hurry. So we did a bunch of like 8 episodes on spiritual disciplines and things like that. So again, no rhyme or reason. So we decided rather than just trying to reconvene every single time and say, what are we going to do now? We're just going to do an episode every other week.
Yeah.
We're going to have some maybe underlying theme. Right now we're doing kind of just, how would you describe it?
Diagnosing the culture.
Yeah, the culture around us. And so we're just kind of having, it's an underlying theme, but we haven't explicitly stated that, which gives us a little bit actually of flexibility and freedom.
Yeah.
But we have committed to our listeners that we're going to do every other week. They can expect that.
So this is just my real strong encouragement to you. How much effort do you want to put into this? And then take times to reevaluate. Okay, I'm putting in this much effort. Am I getting the results that I want to get for the effort that I've put into this? And so these are conversations that Caleb and I have periodically throughout the year to say, okay, this is not our job responsibility, right? We both have a superior, right? And we don't want this to become a contentious point of like, hey, your jobs aren't doing podcasts or whatever, right? So are we putting in as little effort as possible, right? That's like important for us. Are we getting a return on how much effort we're doing? These are all different things, and I learn new shortcuts every time I mess up, And this last week, I was like, I'd like to edit this on my home computer, but I don't have time. I know I can do it on my iPad. I'll do it on my iPad. So I did it. It was supposed to release on Thursday, and so Thursday morning I woke up and I'm editing it, and I should have already been done with it, but it wasn't. And then I tried uploading it from the hotel Wi-Fi, and it failed halfway through, and then I was like, I need to do something else, and then I learned another shortcut so that it works, right? But now I know going forward, I'm always going to do it that way, right? So it's all about, as you fail, okay, how can I shortcut and circumvent and make this easier for myself next time? Great. Any other questions on the how before we kind of go to the next part?
It's equipment next.
So one of the questions that we got in the app was, and you can kind of see the equipment there, was, so how much does it cost to get set up? And this, again, goes back into your why and your what. If you own a cell phone that can record your voice, you already have all the equipment that you need to do a podcast. Is that the sort of thing you want to do, or are you looking to do something else? What we did was we have a list of all of our detailed equipment on our answer on the back. There's a detailed list of our equipment. So we use...
But please don't leave.
Yeah.
That's all I needed. All right, see you later.
Okay. So we use like a bass drum mic stand that has like a heavy weight to sit on the table because we don't have a dedicated space for recording, so we have to set it up and break it down every time. So that's nice and mobile. We have a pop filter that just kind of catches the pop. These mics are $100, which is, in the world of mics, not that expensive, right? But that's what we use. They're nice. They get great quality. This right here is the most expensive piece of equipment. It's Zoom H6. It's in there. There's a bunch of others out there, but it's a highly mobile audio interface. And it works on 2 levels. You can record directly to it on an SD card, or you can use it to record to another electronic device, like a computer or an iPad.
Would that be a USB?
Yeah, it has a USB port. Yeah, which is so. My iPad's got this like little USB, C dongle, and it just goes whoop right there, just like that. It works.
Pretty good.
Yeah, and then we use nice headphones, cost $100.
If we had to do it again, I think we would have loved to get the headphones with the little microphone, like the gamer ones or whatever. I would have loved that because we're very, we could be more mobile. But it works great.
It works for us. Yeah. So I know there was a big question about cost. You can add up all that, but again, it's really coming down to what are you wanting to do, why are you wanting to do it, what do you want it to look like, and then you can start to make your purchase decisions from there.
Is there cost to the platforms
Oh yeah, you can find all the different ones out there. I don't know of any free ones because before we put it on Subsplash, we just put it on our website, and we used our website to host it for the RSS feed that then was going to Apple and Spotify and Google and all that.
So no cost to kick it to Apple and Spotify.
No, not for our website. I don't know. We have a tech guy at church, and we're like, hey, so we're doing this podcast, and he's like, okay, here, let me set it up for you. And I never actually uploaded them. He does all the uploads. So,
no, me.
Yeah, when you did.
I'm like, the tech guy does?
No, you did. I never.
I do. Yeah. So going back to the Subsplash, so like for me with my like shortcuts too, I used to get so detailed. Like I would take notes as we were recording. Like here are some different themes as far as like kind of searchable tags and whatnot. And eventually it was just like, this is just too much. It's taking too much time. So I do a lot of copy paste. Here's kind of the theme we're doing. Here's just initial questions maybe we ask. And then I populate that and then set it up. And I tell Sam, hey, it's ready to go. He does all the editing for the podcast and uploads it. And then I set it up. We can do Subsplash allows you to have push notifications with your app. So we have the push notifications set. And yeah, he just uploads it and it's good to go. So, yeah, more shortcuts with that too.
Yeah. So another question that we received was, so how much time do you spend doing
this?
this?
Set up real quick. Just
oh, well, yeah.
You already saw the video. But
yeah, you saw the video. So you turn the light off. You hit the light real quick.
Just so you can see. We showed you the equipment. Now you can see what it looks like.
So right here is the Zoom H6, the audio receiver device. It then has the XLR inputs that are going out to the mics, pop filters, stands, headphones, right, for both of us. We do need a splitter for the mics. I didn't include that. Whatever. You can figure that out. And then that little
for
cord
the
right
headphones?
there.
For the headphones.
For the headphones.
Yeah.
Right. Headphone splitter. That little is the USB that's going to the iPad that's recording this. Okay, so there it is in the flesh, so to speak. All right, you hit the lights again, please. Please and thank you. Thank you, light person. Give it up for light person.
You're the real MVP.
That's right. One of the questions we received, so how much time do you guys spend? And if you've heard anything today, it's how we like to spend no time doing this. And so we've really cut it down. This is what we're currently doing. Maybe you want to take this over?
Yeah. Sure. So as far as like pre-recording goes, this 30 minutes is really kind of the setup. What you saw in both the video and the picture is our church. We're trying to create a recording studio. We're doing a lot, as many of you probably, doing a lot more video. So we're trying to create more of a somewhat dedicated space. So we put shiplap on the wall, and now you have a recording studio.
Yeah.
That's all you need, guys, is wood on the wall. No, I'm just kidding, but it's going to be better. So it's a space that we're able to use a little bit more, especially during the week. It's we have a preschool and early childhood center in the basement, but our upstairs rooms are only used for our like Sunday school Kids Connect ministry. So it's a space available for us. So it takes me about 30 minutes or so to set all of that up. We also use some lights. We didn't include that in the equipment list, but
no, it's in the equipment list.
Are the lights?
Yeah, in the detail.
Oh, they are fantastic. So there's some lights that that are shining. Yeah.
They're all sorts of different prices. Yeah. Just go on Amazon. There's like 1 million of them.
Our small group guy bought them, so we didn't have to. It's great. So it takes, like I said, about 30 minutes to set up, and so I just Sam's over in our Greeley site. It takes him about 30 minutes to drive over. If we do it at our Fort Collins site, so I set up for about 30 minutes. What's the 2 to 4 hours for?
So the 2 to 4 hours is sometimes. Like, we did a book series last summer, and so sometimes there is, like, a level of prep that we are doing.
Yeah, if we're reading or researching, yeah, right? So, like,
but that's not every time.
Exactly, yeah. And then the recording itself, we like to have our episodes, it's just our own kind of limits. We like to have them about 45 to 55 minutes. We just have this kind of idea that people don't really want to do longer than 60 minutes. It's not true. People will listen to...
No, for sure.
You know, I mean, everybody's been here, and you guys have probably gone to similar sessions. Everybody's talking about Joe Rogan and his 3-hour podcast. People listen to that, right?
Yep.
And they can break it up when they need to. But we just like to limit it so it's a little bit palatable. However, we also say, like, we also don't want to limit ourselves. If there's more on the table that we can talk about that is good, that we're in a zone, then we'll keep going. So that's why it is anywhere. So our with this kind of new season, this new year, our first episode was about 2 hours. We decided to split it. This most recent one that we just released yesterday, we decided to keep it at 1 hour and 20 something as it is, right? 1 hour and 30 something.
What you're not explaining is the first episode we took and split into 2 episodes.
Part 1, Part 2.
Part 1, Part 2. This episode we kept all together. Right.
Yeah. So
even
as
though
far
they're
as
both over.
the recording is always the same length. So going back to kind of the juice squeeze, Sam and I talked, and to have Part 1, Part 2, we think is palatable for somebody to say, I can listen to Part 1 and then I can listen to Part 2 later.
Yeah.
But as we talked, we actually found with the analytics that we have more people listen to Part 1 and people don't listen to Part 2. Whether it's too late, that we've already lost them, or they just haven't listened to it yet, so there is that factor.
Yeah.
But as far as Sam with the editing, he now has to edit 2 episodes that could be only 1 that we just talked. So we actually made it harder. So we actually got some feedback, and we just decided we're just going to stick with 1 episode. So if we record, we're talking for 2 hours, we're just going to keep it as 2 hours, and you can push play and pause whenever you need to. So that's about the recording. The editing takes Sam, especially after the fine-tuning his skills, is about 20 minutes or so.
It used to take me a lot more time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The podcast platform that I do with the Subsplash stuff is about 15 minutes, pulling it up, thinking through some different themes, setting it up there. What else are we forgetting? Anything else?
No, so I mean, as you look at that, maybe like 2 hours every other week for both of us. That's because we have really focused on efficiency, focused on simplicity, focused on how can we do this the easiest way possible. Sometimes that editing is like an hour and a half, especially in the times where one voice is like so much higher, but because I don't have separate voice tracks, I have to go through and edit each one. But that's me trying to create like a palatable product that is pleasant to the ears.
Say that again. That was fantastic.
A palatable product that is pleasant to the ears.
Love it. He's got a voice for podcast. So just real quick, in this pre-recording part also, we are kind of, that Zoom H6 has different gain levels and stuff, so we're dialing those in. As we'll get into the 10 Commandments, we do a little sound check. We'll start recording, we'll listen to it, make sure that we're dialed in. The nice thing is we're really the only ones that use it.
Yeah.
So, and even though our voices do change, depending on the day, we keep it around the same level, and it's a little bit easier that we've kind of tweaked it. Yeah.
What kind of planning before that goes into it in terms of, you want an unscripted conversation, but it's not like you guys make up the topic that week, right?
Yeah, so our church uses Microsoft Teams, and so it's just a great collaborative platform that we use, and so we have our own podcast team for the 2 of us that we just kind of post together throughout the day. Here's what we should talk about. Here's our idea. We have a schedule of ideas. We have a schedule of...
I think we might have like a quarterly planning session where we're like, okay, what is it that we want to talk about?
Yeah.
And then we just kind of free flow it.
Yeah, and then we just fill in that. So it's as much as we can outside of that actual like set time throughout the day as we can do it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
But we don't spend a lot of time on it. Yes.
I have a question, which could sound very judgy, so please don't hear it as...
He's got thicker skin than I do.
We're terrible at this.
So if you're doing a 20-minute edit on a 45-minute episode, you're trusting the waveform and your experience of the time together, and you're not listening to the whole thing through.
Oh no, I don't listen. I used to. Okay. I don't anymore.
And your experience obviously is confirming that as an acceptable risk level. That
if there's something that happens in the podcast, so the batteries in the Zoom die, right? Okay, now I've got to go back. I've got to listen. I've got to line things up. Okay, I got to do that. If I know that, wow, there was a point where we like had a brain fart for 3 minutes. Okay, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna find that. I'm gonna clip that out. But if you listen to our thing, I'm not editing out the ums, the ahs. I'm not producing it very much because I don't want to put the time into it. So yeah, I'm really just trusting that it works.
It goes back to our why, right? That we just want to have, or our what actually. It's an unscripted conversation. So it's
right.
I stutter a lot. Sam is much more polished, and so we just have that. That's just who we are. And the nice thing is because our audience is mostly our people who know us.
Yeah.
They already know that's how we talk, and we want to be just as real as we can in it, and just the way that we talk. So
for sure,
I find that freeing.
Sure.
Yeah.
I just know that my AV teacher's rolling over in his grave. But that's okay.
Sure.
He died before.
Hey, you're here.
was invented.
You're here, right?
There you go. That's right. That's right. Yes, in the back.
Just from a technical standpoint, so you take your MP3 file? Is that what you're?
So we have MP4 files it's Imovie files from the iPad.
Gotcha. Okay.
Put that into Imovie.
So you're storing that somewhere, whether it's Subsplash or
Yeah.
your website.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then I guess, and maybe you're going to hit this yet, but how does it then get to Apple Podcasts and Spotify? And all that?
So what Subsplash does is that they have a podcast element. You upload it to their website, and then they take the audio. They'll use it as an RSS feed. If you go to any of the podcasting hosting websites, and there are dozens and dozens out there, right, that you just get that RSS feed, and then you go to Apple, Google Play, Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher, yada, 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 right? And then it just goes there. Those are one-time setups. We're not covering that. You could just Google how to get on Apple, and there's a million guides out there on the steps. What you need is an RSS feed. And then you get that from wherever you're hosting it. Yeah.
Are you saving all of your podcasts? Like do you do a backup of them or anything?
No.
Or you just throw them off to Subsplash?
We put them on Subsplash, and that's where they're saved.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. What's next?
Yep. Okay, all right. So to close our session, the 10 Commandments of podcasting. And number 1, thou shalt always push record. You would think that that's obvious. It would also be obvious that you should have no other gods, yet God still tells us, right?
Yeah.
How many episodes have we lost by not pushing record?
Yeah, Sam is now at the point where it's like, remind me to push record.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's rough. It's really rough.
Well, the problem is, like, you just get, because before we push record, we say, okay, what do we kind of want this to look like? Because, again, it's unscripted, so we
Right.
don't go, we literally do not have papers in front. We do if there's maybe some research that we did, but it's not, okay, Sam says this, then Caleb says this. It's,
Right.
we talk about, how do you want to kind of go, where do we want, and we always want to land on Jesus, for sure,
Yeah.
or at least we want to sprinkle Jesus throughout and have, that's the answer always.
Yeah.
But it's, yeah, and so when you get in the zone, you're just like, let's just go. And you got to stop and push record.
Yeah, you got to make sure you do that. Number 2, always have spare battery. Thou shalt always have spare batteries.
Especially if what you use needs batteries.
Yeah, especially if what you use needs batteries.
You don't really realize how quick they die when you're using something like this.
So our Zoom H6 uses 4 batteries.
AA.
And AA batteries. And we've had it die in the middle of a recording session, not realizing that it died, then going a period of time, glancing over and realize, oh, that thing's dead. When did it die?
How long has it been dead?
How long has it been dead?
Please only be 2 minutes.
Right.
And no, it's like 20 minutes.
And so now it becomes just like part of second nature for me to like always have an eye on, okay, what's that battery indicator? Is that thing on? Okay. Thou shalt always do a test run. This is something
we talked about this.
We talked about this before. Number 4, thou shalt use front-facing camera. So this is like very specific to us, but this whole thing is, so we use the iPad, right? Before, we were recording like this, nicer camera on the back. But then we had a problem where we didn't press record. We did a whole episode, came back to it and realized, oh, we didn't press record. Now, we do a front-facing camera, not as nice, but I can see that it's recording me.
Yeah. Because when we use the Zoom, we pushed record on the Zoom. Here
Right.
we push record on the iPad because it is both that video, audio aspect. And when you can't see, that it's recording, that's the problem. So that's why we just decide to use the not as nice camera. However, with the iPad Pro, it's still legit. It's still really good.
Number 5, thou should have recording safety nets. Like I said, we don't. We fly without a parachute, but that's our choice. There's a bunch of different ways how you can do that, but people who do podcasts recommend that you do.
What would be
like
an
a
example?
second recording or like?
So this would be like if you're recording on Zoom. Now you're trusting Zoom to capture the recording, but you should also have a hardware component that is also capturing the recording in case Zoom fails. Because what will happen is after you do the Zoom recording, it will then compile the thing, consolidate it, and sometimes during that process, the file gets corrupted, and then you don't have anything. And especially with an interview where you're bringing somebody else in, it might be hard to say, hey, thank you so much for that interview. It totally failed. Can you do it again? So
we did have one.
We did have one that did happen to one person before we were using Zoom, yeah.
This may be really obvious, but you're showing us both of you sitting there, and then you're saying we do Zoom, and we're on our own separate cameras, and so...
Yeah, so Zoom is when we do an online recording, when we're interviewing somebody out of state, and then our normal practice is that when it's just the two of us, we do an in-person. And so if you look at our answers under the how, we put both in-person and online. Yeah.
So online is when we're on the Zoom.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
Zoom machine.
That's great. Yep.
And since you separate the tracks in Zoom, you're just assuming a longer edit on your end then?
So yes and no, it depends on what you're doing. If you're only doing audio, it may not be a longer edit. I used to use GarageBand for that, and I'd go through and I would have my template set up, kind of similar to what I was doing in Imovie, and just kind of making sure all the tracks were kind of leveled more or less. But yeah, it was a little bit, that's one of the reasons why now I won't even do that. I'll just take the Zoom video with the audio, and assuming that it's good enough, then I'll use that. If the other person's audio that we're interviewing is like really bad, high, low or something, I may take the separate tracks and then do all that. But because it's recorded in Zoom, the video and the audio are the same bit rates and they match and the lip sync works and it's wonderful.
So ideally it's just your guest audio you're really looking at.
Yeah, for the most part. It's weird. Usually it's fine, but sometimes not. It's a good option. Yep.
Question on the equipment.
Yep.
When you're one person's remote, they need the same equipment as you have.
No. No, not with Zoom. Now, their audio is usually not as good as ours.
They're probably using the Apple headphones that are plugged into the auxiliary.
At the other end, their audio won't come out as good as yours.
No.
It usually is not.
No, not usually.
But it's
kind of
fine,
like a radio
because,
show.
again, that's not. We don't really care to make it sound perfect. We just, as long as you can hear what they're saying, and Sam does a great job. Like he said, maybe he'll go in and edit a little bit. But yeah, it's obvious that their quality is not as good as us, and we don't really care.
And that's really
they don't care.
common.
Yeah, that's really normal. Yeah.
You can tell when somebody's on a phone
It's-
or on just earbuds, or
You hear it all the time.
Yeah, we think it's an acceptable deal. Yep. Thou shalt always keep an eye on the instruments. That is did that thing turn off? Don't lose your spot. Thou shalt double check the final file, making sure that what's there is what you want to be there, that you didn't upload the wrong thing. That's happened too. Thou shalt develop squeeze shortcuts, whatever you can do to make it easier for yourself. Plan for more time than needed. It usually does take more time than you think it's going to take.
Yeah, because especially like when you're talking, because it's a conversation. We don't know when we're going to end. There's a few episodes of ours, if you listen to it, where like one of us is like, all right, so we're about getting ready to wrap up, and it's an additional 15 minutes because we came up with something great to talk about. Also.
It's like a Baptist preaching a sermon.
Yeah.
He's got 7 final points.
And so in summation, and 30 minutes later.
Right. And then the last one I think is the most important. Thou shalt periodically reevaluate if your what and how are accomplishing your why. Because if you're not accomplishing your why, then why even do it? So thank you very much for your patience. We were sub an hour. That's cool. If you have any more questions, we're happy to answer them. Yes.
Yeah, can I ask just real quickly? So,
yeah.
How do you get your measurements of how many people listen to it or who listens to it?
So we do keep track of that, but what's more important to us than listens is feedback from people. Okay. So like emails, conversations at church. We had one guy who after the episode 2 weeks ago was like, hey, I want to start a life group around this. And then use this as the material, then have like this life group discussion. We're like, this is accomplishing what we want it to accomplish.
Yes, you can do that.
Right? Like we want to have conversations.
Yeah.
We have.
Email us.
We literally just did, and that's where we got the most feedback. We have
Yeah.
people who say, they're going on long road trips and they listen with their kids and they talk about it, which is like, that's fantastic.
Podcast
So,
at Redeemer Connect.
We ourselves have never really done any sort of push where like trying to get more listeners, like share this with your friends. We don't do that. We just don't really care. People automatically do it. We may eventually, or we might not, but people talk about it and they have conversations with each other at church. They have conversations with us, like Sam said. And that's really what our juice is. We just want people to.
We want to start
we
conversations.
We always say we are starting the conversation. Ours is not the final word. You may totally disagree with us completely, or that's when we try to have guests. Like, it wasn't us, it was them.
So 2 years ago, we did.
Oh, that should be the 11th commandment. Always blame the guest.
Always blame the guest. If you're a mega church pastor and you bring in another pastor to do Generosity Sunday, that's exactly what's going on. 2 years ago, we did 4 episodes right after George Floyd in the middle, and it created a lot of conflict and tension, both within different staff people about some of the things that we had talked about and said, and with some people at church. It was just a really kind of explosive time, but it started a conversation, and it was a hard conversation, and it was really kind of, there was a lot of emotion in it, but we wanted to have that conversation. Yeah. And so even in the negative sense, it was still kind of a positive thing for us. Yeah.
Are there numbers out there about, like, I know it's not about the numbers, I don't mean to harp on the numbers.
It might be about the numbers.
It is hard to justify spending a lot of time on something. How do you know what is a worthwhile number? You're talking a little bit more about like qualitative evidence.
For sure.
That like, well, we're kind of getting the gut feeling that it's going well. But I know that, you could be just, could be doing that another way that wouldn't cost all of that time.
I mean, something that we talk about all the time whenever we kind of reevaluate is, at the end of the day too, we enjoy it. Like, we love talking to each other about
we have a great time.
For us to have that, the ability to just talk together, that's a pretty big amount of the juice for us.
Yeah,
just
personal juice.
For us being able, the personal juice, to have that conversation.
Yeah.
So, so I mean, but you're right. Yeah.
I think it goes back to what is your why? And if your why is like, I'm looking to make a side income from this by sponsorships, then you're going to need numbers, and then those are going to be like qualitative things that you need to figure out in terms of reaching your audience, and then all the other. But for us,
the LCMS sponsors us. So.
Yeah.
They would not go near us.
No, not interested.
No, Larry Stodero just left, but there you go.
Bottom line, how many hours a week? I know it's every other week at this point, but what would you say for each of you, giving an accounting of your time? How many hours?
A week?
Yep.
Well, so in a month, maybe would be a better way how to put it. Maybe 8 hours a month, maybe.
Because a lot of it is the recording.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad he knows what he's doing, because the editing, it would take me 3 hours to do the editing, and Sam's got it dialed down, which is really great. So we lean into our specialties too. We found the groove that both of us can do well.
What about as far as the space you record in? Does that matter?
We try and find the best acoustic space, but we don't have a real studio.
You don't realize how loud the AC is. It's crazy.
But it works out. Like, I think the audio of our podcast is pretty good, and we don't have a professional studio in any way.
It's pretty impressive, actually. Yeah. And we're just in a big classroom with a wood wall and then plaster walls or whatever, whatever it is. Also, yeah.
Do you batch record, or do you actually record every other week?
We try and go for the batch if we can. And then there's also when we have interviews, but we're not ready to release that episode. So we're sitting on the Mark Schultz interview that we'll release at some point once
this coming a week from today or tomorrow or yesterday, we're interviewing Flame. If you guys know Flame, from St. Louis, actually went to Concordia Seminary. Super legit guy. We talked with him about his story a while back. We're bringing him back on to talk about race in the church, and so we're going to record that next week with him. But we don't. I kind of have the idea to release it like around the anniversary of George Floyd's death.
Yeah.
But that's in May, and so I don't know. We might get too excited and release it. So who knows? But that's a great question.
Yeah.
We've talked about if we're in the zone and we're able to record a bunch, as you saw, like batch record them. That actually buys us back a little bit of time, redeems some time for us, because we live like an hour away from each other, and the churches that we're mainly at with our two sites are 30 to 45 minutes away from each other. So we gotta, and it's winter. It's Colorado. We get snow, so we do want to make the most use of our time and work together.
We try not to record twice in the same day, though. It's kind of exhausting. You don't have a lot of energy for that second recording.
Yeah, we have done it, but it's hard.
Yeah, it's not preferable.
You guys are more than welcome to leave, but we will hang out.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.